No one will want to marry a second hand like my ex-wife. What an entrance, right?
Absolutely, they're loving it.
Let's keep them smiling.
No one will want to marry a second-hand used woman like you, husband mocked ex-wife. But, esteemed viewers, welcome to Luxurious True Life Stories. Please like and subscribe for more captivating luxury true stories. Let's get into the story. Cold rain flooded the evening streets as Natasha Jackson stood beneath a flickering bus stop light, shielding a worn sketchbook under her coat. Cars rushed past until one suddenly swerved to avoid a cyclist and bumped the curb. A man stepped out, clearly frustrated, but the moment he tried walking his ankle gave way. Without hesitation, Natasha ran through the rain, steadying him before he could fall again. Solomon Clinton wasn't used to strangers helping him. His expensive suit was soaked, his phone had no signal, and his pride hurt more than his ankle. Natasha guided him to the bench, tearing a clean page from her sketchbook to wrap his bleeding palm. He watched her careful hands and noticed she never once asked who he was, only if he was all right. They waited for a cab that never seemed to come. To pass time, she sketched the rainy street while he spoke about ambition and escaping mediocrity. She listened quietly, smiling at his certainty. When headlights finally approached, neither realized the brief storm conversation had already changed the direction of both their lives. Morning sunlight replaced the storm, yet Solomon found himself returning to the same bus stop the next day. He claimed it was coincidence, but he waited longer than necessary, watching pedestrians pass until Natasha finally appeared with her sketchbook again. She looked surprised, then amused, and he quickly invented a reason about thanking her properly. They walked to a nearby cafe, a narrow place filled with the scent of roasted coffee and warm bread. Conversations became routine. Every evening they met, sometimes talking about architecture, sometimes about nothing at all. Solomon spoke of his determination to become a respected corporate lawyer, someone whose name opened doors instantly. Natasha admitted she wanted to design spaces that made people feel safe, even if she never became famous. He admired her calm certainty. She admired his fierce ambition. Neither noticed how natural their presence felt beside each other. Weeks passed without announcement or decision, yet their lives slowly aligned. The barrister began preparing their order before they spoke, and the owner joked they were already a married couple. Solomon laughed but didn't deny it, and Natasha blushed while pretending to focus on her drawings. The simplicity of shared evenings quietly turned into attachment neither questioned. Winter approached and Solomon brought Natasha to an unfinished apartment building on a hill overlooking the city. The concrete floors were bare and cold, the windows without glass, and wind echoed through hollow rooms. Natasha assumed he wanted her opinion as a designer, so she began describing how sunlight would fill the space in spring. Solomon listened but seemed distracted. He finally confessed the building represented his future, a place he promised himself he would one day afford. Then, unexpectedly nervous, he asked if she would stand beside him before that future arrived. From his coat pocket he revealed a modest ring, simple yet sincere. The unfinished apartment felt suddenly warm despite the cold air. Natasha hesitated only long enough to understand the seriousness in his voice. She accepted quietly, and their laughter echoed through empty walls. They left hand in hand, believing shared struggle would always be easier than success alone, unaware that success would test them far more than hardship ever could. Their first apartment was small and narrow, positioned above a noisy grocery store where delivery trucks arrived before sunrise. The ceiling leaked when it rained and the heater worked only when it wished, yet Natasha decorated every corner carefully. She painted one wall soft cream, placed inexpensive flowers on the table, and turned the cramped space into something peaceful. Solomon studied late into the night for his law qualification exams while she worked freelance design sketches beside him, warming tea whenever his focus faded. They rarely spoke about money because there was never enough of it, but they spoke constantly about the future they believed was waiting. Natasha quietly postponed her own career plans, refusing larger design opportunities that required travel because Solomon needed stability during his exams. She told herself sacrifices were temporary and partnership meant adjusting seasons of life. When exhaustion weighed on him, she read legal notes aloud to help him memorize terms, sometimes falling asleep mid-sentence while he continued studying. He began relying on her presence like routine, something comforting yet gradually unnoticed. Gratitude softened into expectation without either realizing the shift. The day he passed his final exam they celebrated with cheap takeout eaten from the box on the floor because they owned no dining table. Solomon promised her the next chapter would be different, easier, and that she would finally pursue her dreams again. Natasha believed him completely. Outside, city lights flickered through the thin curtains while ambition quietly prepared to change the balance of their marriage. Solomon's new position at a prestigious law firm arrived faster than expected, and suddenly tailored suits replaced worn jackets. His schedule filled with meetings, business calls, and events he described as necessary networking. Natasha ironed his shirts carefully each morning, proud yet slightly distant from the world he entered. She attended his first office celebration where polished conversations moved quicker than she could follow, and introductions were brief before people redirected attention toward more influential guests. Colleagues asked what she did, and before she could answer Solomon casually said she was still figuring things out. The words sounded harmless yet lingered painfully. She smiled anyway, laughing politely while holding a glass she barely touched. Later he explained he only meant she hadn't settled into a career yet and advised her to avoid discussing freelance work because it sounded unprofessional around executives. Natasha nodded, though uncertainty quietly replaced her earlier confidence. After that night Solomon began correcting her speech, her clothing choices, even the way she greeted people. He insisted refinement mattered in his profession. Natasha tried adapting, believing she supported his growth, but the warmth of their early days slowly cooled into careful conversations. Success entered their home proudly, and unnoticed beside it came the first quiet distance neither openly acknowledged. Mrs. Evelyn Clinton arrived one afternoon with 2 heavy suitcases and a smile that never reached her eyes. She praised Solomon's achievements repeatedly while inspecting the apartment as though measuring its worth. Natasha prepared tea and welcomed her warmly, but Evelyn's compliments always carried correction, adjusting table settings and rearranging furniture as if improvement were urgent. Solomon seemed relieved by his mother's approval and listened closely whenever she spoke about reputation and appearances. During dinners Evelyn asked subtle questions about Natasha's education, family background, and ambitions, always comparing them to the families of Solomon's colleagues. She insisted successful men required equally impressive partners, speaking gently yet persistently until the idea settled in Solomon's mind. Natasha noticed conversations shifting. Solomon began evaluating things he once ignored, from brand names to social circles. He never accused her directly, but silence replaced reassurance. Late at night Evelyn spoke privately with her son about opportunities he might lose by remaining tied to modest surroundings. Natasha overheard fragments while washing dishes, understanding without hearing everything. The apartment felt smaller after that visit, and Solomon's gaze lingered longer on things he once loved. Change no longer felt distant. It had moved into their home quietly and refused to leave. A formal corporate dinner invited spouses, and Natasha spent hours choosing a dress simple yet elegant. The restaurant shimmered with crystal lighting and carefully arranged conversations. At first Solomon stayed beside her, introducing partners and associates, but his tone sounded rehearsed. When a senior partner asked about Natasha's profession, Solomon laughed lightly and described her as just creative at home, turning the topic toward his own projects. The table chuckled politely while Natasha forced a smile. She tried joining another discussion, but realized she was no longer included. Throughout the evening Solomon spoke confidently yet avoided meeting her eyes, as though acknowledging her directly would interrupt his image. The warmth she once felt beside him disappeared among polished voices and polite laughter. Returning home, she asked if he was embarrassed by her. Solomon denied it but added she should understand how important impressions were in his field. He promised it meant nothing personal, yet his explanation created more distance than silence ever had. That night they slept facing opposite directions for the first time since their marriage began. At the law firm reception desk stood Mia Oliver, dressed with effortless elegance and confidence. She introduced herself as a potential client needing financial representation and spoke with precise charm. Solomon initially remained professional, but her intelligence and humor caught his attention quickly. She listened to his ambitions with admiration that felt refreshing compared to the constant expectations surrounding him. Meetings became frequent under legitimate reasons. Mia complimented his decisions and spoke about investment opportunities, praising his strategic thinking. Her presence felt uncomplicated, free from domestic concerns or emotional tension. Solomon found himself extending conversations beyond necessary business discussions, convincing himself it remained harmless. By the end of the week she knew his preferences, his frustrations, and his goals. He told himself she simply understood his professional world better than anyone else. Meanwhile, Natasha waited at home, unaware a new influence had quietly entered her husband's daily life and begun reshaping his attention. Solomon's schedule stretched later each night, his explanations brief and mechanical. Files followed him home yet remained unopened, while his phone lit repeatedly with muted notifications he read privately. Natasha prepared dinners that cooled untouched on the table, eventually placing them in the refrigerator without complaint. Conversations turned practical, bills, appointments, reminders, never feelings. Even laughter faded, replaced by polite acknowledgement. She attempted small gestures to reconnect, suggesting walks or shared meals outside, but he postponed each plan with confident promises of future time. When he did sit beside her, his attention drifted elsewhere, mind occupied by thoughts he never explained. Natasha noticed unfamiliar cologne lingering on his jacket once, but she dismissed suspicion, choosing trust over doubt, because fear felt heavier than uncertainty. Weeks passed in careful silence. The apartment that once echoed with late-night discussions now held only television noise and distant traffic. Natasha continued sketching designs at the table alone, glancing occasionally toward the door, hoping the man who once filled every moment would return emotionally even before he returned physically. One afternoon Natasha visited Solomon's office unexpectedly to deliver documents he had forgotten. The receptionist hesitated before directing her toward his private meeting room, explaining he had stepped out briefly. Inside she waited beside the desk until a folder slipped from a stack, scattering papers across the floor. She knelt to gather them and noticed payment records attached to a lease agreement. The address led to an upscale apartment far beyond their means, signed under a corporate expense account but authorized personally by Solomon. Attached correspondence included Mia Oliver's name repeatedly. Natasha stared at the documents, reading twice to remove doubt. The realization arrived slowly yet completely, heavier than anger, clarity replacing confusion. She returned everything exactly as found and left the office before he came back. Outside the building the afternoon sun felt unusually cold. Natasha held the copied address in her hand, not trembling, not crying, only understanding that distance now had a reason and silence had an explanation she could no longer ignore. That evening Natasha waited without preparing dinner. The apartment remained dim except for a single lamp beside the table where the copied lease lay neatly folded. Solomon entered late, removing his jacket while speaking about workload, but stopped when he noticed her stillness. She asked calmly who lived at the address. He froze briefly, then sighed as though the question were inconvenient rather than painful. For a moment he considered denying it, yet her steady gaze left no room for excuses. He admitted Mia was important to his professional life and eventually to his personal life as well. His tone held no anger, only certainty, explaining that his future required a partner who matched his status and ambition. Natasha listened quietly, absorbing each word as though they described strangers instead of their marriage. She asked if the years together meant anything. Solomon hesitated before answering that people change, and he refused to remain tied to a past version of himself. Silence followed, heavier than argument. Natasha did not shout or cry. She simply nodded and removed her ring, placing it on the table beside the lease papers. Solomon watched without stopping her, convinced calm separation was easier than emotional conflict. That night ended not with noise, but with a quiet understanding that their shared life had already ended long before the words confirmed it. Legal documents arrived swiftly, prepared with precision that revealed careful planning. Solomon insisted on efficiency, offering financial settlement far smaller than expected due to assets registered solely under his name. Natasha read each page slowly, realizing the partnership she believed protected her never legally existed in equal measure. Lawyers spoke politely but firmly, and the process concluded faster than her emotions could adjust. She packed her belongings into simple boxes, leaving behind furniture chosen together because memories felt heavier than objects. Neighbors watched respectfully while she carried the last suitcase downstairs. Solomon remained inside, focused on a phone call, thanking her for understanding the need for maturity. The door closed gently, yet the sound echoed longer than any argument could have. Natasha moved into a modest rented room across the city. The space held only a bed, a desk, and a window overlooking a narrow alley. She placed her sketchbook on the table and sat quietly, unsure what to draw when the future she designed no longer existed. For the first time since meeting Solomon, her life stood entirely undefined, both frightening and strangely clear. Natasha attempted to contact mutual friends during her first week alone, but replies came slowly and cautiously. Some avoided involvement, others spoke kindly yet distantly, unwilling to oppose Solomon's growing reputation. Invitations stopped arriving, conversations shortened, and she realized social circles often followed success rather than truth. Even casual acquaintances seemed unsure how to address her, offering sympathy wrapped in discomfort. To support herself, she accepted small interior design tasks, arranging studio apartments, repainting rental rooms, repairing layouts ignored by larger firms. Payment remained minimal, but enough for rent and groceries. Each evening she returned tired yet calmer, discovering work restored quiet confidence no opinion could remove. Without realizing it, independence began forming where dependence once existed. One night she organized donated furniture at a community shelter simply because help was needed. The simplicity of gratitude there contrasted sharply with polished corporate gatherings she once attended. For the first time since the divorce, she slept peacefully, understanding her worth remained unchanged even if her circumstances had. A crowded intersection stalled traffic when a minor collision blocked the road. Among waiting vehicles a modest car stopped abruptly and an older gentleman inside struggled to breathe. Passers-by hesitated, assuming authorities would handle it, but Natasha moved quickly, opening the door and guiding him out before panic worsened his condition. She spoke steadily, encouraging slow breaths while calling emergency services. The man remained composed despite discomfort, thanking her with surprising calm. During the ambulance ride she stayed beside him to ensure he remained conscious, answering medical questions on his behalf. Hospital staff received him quickly, and she prepared to leave quietly, believing her role finished once professionals arrived. Before she could go, a well-dressed aide hurried in and recognized the patient immediately. Security officers followed, yet the man insisted she remain until he was stable. Natasha realized only then he was someone important, though his respectful tone felt ordinary. She left hours later without learning his full identity, assuming she had simply helped another stranger in need. 2 days later a formal letter arrived requesting her presence at an official residence to express gratitude. Hesitant yet curious, Natasha attended and discovered the man she helped was President Jackson Charles. Instead of distance, he greeted her warmly, thanking her for treating him like a person rather than a position. Conversation flowed naturally as he asked about her work and listened carefully. He invited her to assist a housing improvement initiative needing practical design understanding. Their meetings remained professional but comfortable, built on mutual respect rather than obligation. Natasha offered honest opinions while he appreciated her straightforward perspective rarely found in political environments. Over weeks they met frequently for project discussions, often extending into thoughtful conversations about responsibility and resilience. Without intention their connection deepened into trust. Natasha found calm in his sincerity, while he valued her grounded presence. Neither rushed meaning into the bond forming quietly between them. Months later Natasha received an invitation to a national charity gala hosted by the presidential office. Clara Whitmore personally assisted her preparation, choosing a refined gown that reflected elegance without extravagance. Natasha felt nervous entering the grand hall filled with diplomats, executives, and media, yet she carried herself with calm dignity learned through hardship. President Jackson Charles greeted guests nearby, but had not yet formally joined her, keeping arrangements discreet. Across the hall Solomon Clinton arrived confidently beside Mia Oliver, proud of his rising influence. His laughter paused when he noticed Natasha among distinguished attendees. Surprise shifted quickly into amusement as he approached her, Mia watching curiously. He spoke loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, remarking that society events were not meant for people clinging to past marriages. Then with a dismissive smile he added, "No one will want to marry a second-hand used woman like you." Conversations around them quieted. Natasha remained composed, offering no reaction beyond steady silence. Before Solomon could continue, the master of ceremonies requested attention for a special announcement, drawing every gaze toward the entrance as the president stepped forward. President Jackson Charles walked directly toward Natasha and extended his hand. Murmurs spread through the hall as he gently guided her beside him. His voice remained calm yet clear as he introduced her not as a guest or advisor, but as his wife, thanking her for bringing sincerity into his life beyond public duty. The announcement echoed through the silent ballroom. Solomon's expression froze completely, color draining from his face, while Mia stared in disbelief. Guests shifted from curiosity to respectful applause, the earlier insult hanging painfully in the air. Natasha met Solomon's stunned gaze briefly, not with triumph but quiet closure. The moment required no explanation. Reality spoke louder than any response she could offer. The president continued greeting attendees naturally, as though nothing unusual occurred, while staff adjusted protocol around the unexpected revelation. Solomon stepped backward, unable to speak, realizing the certainty he once held about status had collapsed instantly. The evening continued, but for him everything had already changed beyond repair. The morning after the gala, Solomon's phone flooded with messages, not congratulations, but urgent alerts from his bank and financial advisor Adrian Cole. Several accounts had been emptied overnight through authorized transfers bearing his digital approval. Confused, he called Mia repeatedly, yet her number was unreachable. Her apartment lease, registered under corporate expenses, had been terminated hours earlier, and building management confirmed she vacated before dawn. Panic replaced disbelief as investigators reviewed records revealing carefully staged investments and forged identities connected to Mia Oliver. Every document he signed trusting her guidance now worked against him legally. His firm suspended him pending inquiry, unwilling to risk association with scandal. The same ambition that elevated him now exposed him publicly. Solomon stood alone in his expensive office stripped of access, realizing admiration he once enjoyed depended entirely on success. Without it, doors closed quickly. The certainty that drove his choices vanished, replaced by the quiet understanding that he had traded loyalty for illusion and lost both at once. Natasha's new role beside President Jackson Charles brought attention she handled carefully. Rather than luxury events, she focused on housing improvement programs, redesigning shelters and affordable residences using practical solutions learned from her own struggles. Communities welcomed her sincerity, seeing effort rather than performance. She insisted decisions include local workers and young designers seeking opportunity. Media interest grew naturally, highlighting projects rather than personal history. The president supported her independence, allowing her initiatives to stand on their own merit. Their partnership functioned with mutual respect. Private conversations remained simple while public duties remained purposeful. Natasha felt neither overshadowed nor elevated beyond herself, only placed where her skills mattered. Recognition followed gradually, not for status but contribution. Invitations arrived from institutions requesting her guidance, and she accepted only those aligning with her goals. Each completed project strengthened her confidence that dignity did not require approval, only honest work consistently done. Months later, Solomon passed a community housing complex during a routine appointment related to his legal penalties. A plaque near the entrance credited Natasha's design leadership. Residents moved comfortably through bright corridors filled with natural light, and he paused silently, realizing she had achieved the meaningful success he once dismissed. Natasha, visiting the same building for inspection, noticed him briefly across the courtyard. They exchanged a quiet nod acknowledging shared history without reopening it. No anger remained, only understanding that their paths had separated long before their divorce. She walked forward toward waiting residents discussing improvements, leaving the past where it belonged. That evening she returned home where President Jackson Charles awaited with calm familiarity rather than ceremony. They shared a simple meal discussing future projects and ordinary plans. Outside the city lights shimmered again, but this time they reflected not ambition or regret, only a steady life rebuilt on respect and truth. As this story comes to an end, remember that behind every luxury lies a truth few ever see. If this story moved you, support the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Until the next unforgettable true story, stay inspired and stay curious.